Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, welcome back for another episode, buddy. How you doing?
Yariv, I am like the most excited I've been in a while. Reason being, there's actually hockey to watch in the
Yeah,
summer. I'm a big hockey guy. I'll watch any hockey that there is that's kind of on TV or just
yeah.
like anywhere I can find it. So just the fact that there's World Juniors and even some Flyers prospects that are doing well in the World Juniors that we have to talk about. Going to be a fun episode, Yariv. Excited, buddy.
Love it, dude. Yes. And we'll be getting into that in a little bit. Let's introduce our guest, Jim Iacovone. I think
Got
it's
it.
Iacovone. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I should have asked ahead of time. Anyway,
that's okay.
founder of High and Wide Radio. If you guys haven't heard his podcast, you should definitely check it out. It has quality stuff with awesome interviews. Jim, welcome to the show, buddy. How you doing?
Doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm just looking forward to this for a couple weeks now. I'm excited to hang out.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. I think we got to talk a little bit when we were at the that tournament.
Oh yeah, that 3-on-3 for the development camp. Yeah.
That had a podcast vibe to it. You know what I mean? Like we were
It
all just
did.
sitting there lined up in the mirror, just like commenting on these guys.
It was fun. Yeah,
Yeah. So I feel like that was a taste of what's to come here.
for sure.
Yeah. So we have some pretty good topics actually, and I think what Vasili's referring to, obviously, is the World Junior Championships, which are actually going on right now. There's some games to the right of me. They're happening live. There are 3 Flyers players currently, 4 currently tonight, and all 4 of them are playing, and it's kind of exciting. Vasili, I'll let you open this up because I feel like you're pretty excited about this in general.
Yeah.
Give me like a status update of what's going on with the 4 prospects within the Flyer, or at least the top teams and the teams that matter right now, and like how they're affecting the team.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Zanetti, first off, with Switzerland, we can start with him. He looked to be a bit hurt. I'm not sure exactly if he's in tonight or not, but I believe that they were not going to play him. So we can update you there. But pretty much the main 2 guys is just Tyson Forster and Emil Andre, and both of them are just doing very well so far.
Elliot Denoyer.
Yeah, Elliot Denoyer as well, obviously on Canada in the 4th line role. I mean, not in a scoring position yet, but still playing some good defensive hockey for Canada too. But I mean, Andre and Forster are really the talk, kind of at least from a Flyers perspective in terms of the tournament. So far, it's actually great. Andre has in 5 games 4 goals, 4 assists, and then you have Forster, who in technically his 5th game tonight would be 3 goals and 1 assist for 4 points. So both guys almost at a point a game pace there, which is pretty impressive in the tournament. The most interesting part for me, really just for it and just for the Flyers prospects, would probably be Andre, just because he's really under the radar in terms of media, people kind of talking about him. He kind of gets forgotten, I would say, amongst the prospects a bit. And then this tournament kind of brought him back to the forefront of like maybe talking circles, things like that, just in terms of the Flyers. But the guy just is really slick on the ice, in my estimation, like from what I've seen of his play, like great skating, great first pass ability the other night. He had a great bank pass for a breakaway goal to one of his teammates. And then also today against Latvia, I mean, you could say it's one of the weaker teams in the tournament, but they made to the quarterfinals for a reason. So they're obviously not one of like the worst teams. But I would definitely say that Andre made his mark. I mean, 1-1 game, tied in the 3rd. He steps by like a block shot, does a little toe drag and gets it through the net, deflects in. Huge goal and a huge game in the quarterfinals to go up 2-1 and get the victory for his team as the captain. I mean, that's a huge thing, I think, to be excited about and just to look forward to as a Flyers like prospect to see them do something like that. So I think that's great. And then you have Forster as well, who is just showing his prowess with the shot. 3 games in a row, he's had 3 goals straight. So that's pretty impressive as well. So I'll leave it to you guys. I kind of went through it all there, I think.
No. It's perfect. I wanted a summary breakdown because there's obviously a lot going on, and I don't want to pretend like we're going to talk about a specific game. We're kind of just doing a quick oversight.
Yeah.
And I wanted to catch people up because I know a lot of people probably are not watching these games. I know a lot of, like, I have it on right now, but it's on the NHL network. It's not like
Yeah, exactly. Not
NHL
everybody has
is on
the
vacation
NHL.
right now.
Not everyone has the NHL network.
Yeah. So I think I knew that you'd be able to summarize it well.
And if you're in Canada, like it's not even like usually it's a huge thing, like around Christmas. But even like some of my buddies or just like people I work with in general, like that are, usually into stuff like that. I would be talking to them saying, "Oh yeah, like catching the World Juniors," and nobody even really knows it's on. So I just think the time slot and the fact that it's like the summer is kind of a weird place for it, so people might not be aware.
Yeah, I totally get that. Jim, how you feeling about these guys? I mean, it obviously, we're summarizing it and we're not even done yet, but the Flyers clearly have two guys who are making an impact already amongst this group. Do you want to caveat that with, I think Andre is also 20. I think they're both 20 years old.
Yeah,
right?
they're a lot older. That's the
right.
thing,
So they're in the older part of the stage group. So you kind of expect them to make an impact, but they aren't disappointing either.
No, yeah.
I guess, I know you're a fan, obviously, but as somebody who's kind of been watching, and I know your opinion somewhat about this team, you don't have a lot of high hopes for this upcoming season. Does something like this get you excited that maybe some of the young guys, and these guys might not even be the specific guys we're talking about, might be further along? Is this like a kind of a, is it doing anything for you internally to kind of watch these guys succeed on the national level at a tournament like this?
I think if I was actually watching the games and I saw this, I would be probably more excited than I am.
But that's a key point too.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm doing the same thing as I think most others right now. I mean, life comes first, and the games I think are on during the day. I mean, they're on tonight, right? Like you said.
Yeah, Canada game's on right now. Got in the background.
So with everything going on, it's been tough for me to watch. So I'm catching goal highlights and whatnot, and I see Andre's got 8 points in 5 games as a defenseman. He's top 5 in scoring for the tournament.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, right? That I think, hey, if you want to get excited for that, go for it. For me though, I would have to watch the games and actually see him play, and then I'd be able to get excited. I will say though, Tyson Forster, I am excited for Tyson Forster. We saw him in development camp. This kid's in shape, right? Yariv, like this guy is going to have I think he's going to have a monster year. Barring injury. The kid looks poised, like he's confident, he's ready, and the fact that you're able to see it now in this tournament, ripping 3 straight, Vasili.
Yeah.
Dude, he's in for a massive year, and I'm excited. I wanted them to take Forster back in that draft. Unfortunately, he went through some injury troubles last year. I think he's going to make up for it this year. He's probably not going to press for a roster spot on the Flyers, but I think he's going to be a difficult cut,
Dude, he's my dark horse, man. He is my dark horse.
I could see it too, and you never know if there's an injury or two in camp too. Like
it's okay. Yes, it's also you got to consider the upside in there too. It's the same reason why Frost gets the benefit of the doubt. I think a lot of people are we're a little disenchanted by first round picks right now, like the Nolan Patrick thing, and obviously like the way people feel about Provorov and TK. It's like, it's not like when we used to draft Richards and Drew. It's like people don't feel the same way about first round picks right now. Like even Cutter Gauthier, nobody's talking about this kid at all, which I think
even though he looks like he's going to be pretty decent.
I think he looks awesome. But I think overall it's just like I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
People weren't they're not as excited for prospects like they used to be.
Yeah, they're not as excited for prospects as they used to be. And I think people are underestimating how good Tyson Forster is. Like how good the upside could be.
Man, he could really shoot it.
I've been talking about this a lot. Look, we don't know how good players can be. And like David Pasternak's a good example of that. Like for every time that you tell me you find Matthew Tkachuk at number 5, I'll show you David Pastrnak. I'll show you Claude Giroux. There's so many different scenarios to find players. Where you're looking is for a mold. Why did you want him, Jim? Right? You wanted him because you saw a player with all of the tools that you're like, if this guy can put together what I'm hoping, like there's a high impact. This is maybe a Mark Stone type goal scorer. I don't know if he's going to be as good defensively or whatever, but a guy who could be around the net, who can shoot the puck from the outside of the net. It could do kind of all those little things that you love and you miss, like a Tim Kerr kind of in a way, like we're dying to see those type of players here. So you look at the mold, you look at the success that he had so early. ahead of schedule without the injury. Like he might have already been on this team at the end of last year. And I don't think it's that crazy. Like who's really competing with him on our team at that age group? Yes, there are guys above him in an age group, like Tippett obviously is a guy, and you could say they're above him, injury and ages and whatnot. But in his age group at 20 years old, there's nobody in our system that competes with him offensively.
Yeah, he's at the forefront for sure.
Right. So he's up in that group where you're like, if you are a really good first round pick, you could make the NHL next year. Just like Travis Konechny surprised people, made it early. I don't think it's that crazy. Like Forrester could do
especially if he has a strong camp and like he plays well in those preseason games. Like that's going to be the real breaking point for him to actually make the team. But I agree
injuries.
Injuries as well. But I agree too with what you were saying, Jim. Like if he doesn't actually make the team, like probably first call up, I would imagine. Because I mean, who else would you put ahead of him, right?
He's going to be one of those guys where you're like there's not really a spot on the roster for him right now, right? Like if you were going to put him somewhere, you'd probably put him in Tippett's spot, right? Maybe like a third line role. So he's going to be one of those guys where it's like, he's going to get cut, but like how long is he going to
like York last year?
Yeah. How long is he going to stay with the Phantoms? Like he's going to probably go on a goal scoring streak, get hot. And then at that point, he's knocking down the door to be called up.
I think he's going to have a big year, man.
So
I am excited a little bit for at least one guy.
Well, no. I'm not trying to be like, oh, I got you, but it's like, it's the thing where it's like, it's been such a shitty year that like it's hard to remember these things. But I think it's also important because you have to. This is like something Vasili and I were talking about. Like you can't talk about extremes, right? Like you can't say that the team like it's almost like what you and Dan were talking about was on that live Twitter thing that we did for Hockey DB. It was kind of like that's why he like gambled with you because he's like, look, there is a reality where this team makes the playoffs. It's not the likelihood. You're being an asshole if you're saying, "Hey, this team is going to be amazing." You're being an asshole. You're ignoring reality. But you can't also say that they're definitely going to be the worst team in the league. Not that I'm saying you said that, but the reality is that the answer is kind of vague, which is the problem to begin with. And it's somewhere in the middle probably, which is also frustrating.
And there's a lot of question marks to really tell too in a lot of areas. So.
Which in my opinion, where the anger is coming from. But I think that's where you have to talk about this team. It's like, oh, there's some good things, but then there's also,
But don't get me wrong. So like, when I look at the roster, I'm like, okay, this roster is not terrible. Like it's not.
Right.
However, when you consider Sean Couturier coming back from the injury that he's coming back from, and there's no Claude Giroux for him to play with, it's like, well, how are they going to be scoring goals in that top line?
And Farabee's out.
And Farabee's out. Like, what's it going to look like? And then, if you're still, I don't know if guys are still counting on Ellis to come back or anything like that. Like, I think we're not anymore, right? Like,
I wouldn't say that he's
the plus
back.
if he does.
If he is, it's a nice surprise. But like, let's be real, right? He's most likely not gonna make his way back. That's for sure.
Right. So like, I'm kind of looking at it like, I mean, how did they say that they're viewing this year as
stabilizing year or
stabilizing year? Right. So they're going to be kind of analyzing guys who may not be here in another season. Can they actually stick around or not? And I think this year, I don't know, maybe they start out okay with the new coach and whatnot, and then as teams start getting ramped up, like some of the better teams, then maybe you see them start to fade like end of November, December. Not to be Debbie Downer, but sure. I just don't see where the goals are going to come from.
Yeah, I understand that. The reality though is the goal scoring for this team really what we're worried about. And I'm not saying that you're wrong about your assessment of them. I'm saying, but is it really the goal scoring that is a problem for you, or is it, and not just you, everybody? Or is it just, I don't know how this team plays? Because if they play the way that they played last year, they're not going to score goals. Like you know that, but they're also not stopping anybody. They're also probably chasing Carter Hart out of net.
What's their identity really?
Continuing to piss off Provorov, and the locker room continues to regress, and the ownership probably starts to eat itself up or whatever. Not the ownership, the management. And at that point, we're probably looking at maybe not a fire sale, but we are looking at an overhaul. But I think the reality is that we're probably not gonna get that. I think there's a good chance that Chuck Fletcher will not make it through. No offense, Fletcher. He won't be here on the end of this. And I think we're just going through a cycle. Like the same way, you know, there are other teams that have gone through cycles where, they went through really bad times and then they come out of that. I think this is kind of what's going on with the Flyers. I think this is the churn after Ed Snyder. Oddly,
Yeah.
we don't have stabilizing anymore.
No. And it kind of, I'm not sure what they mean when they say things anymore, because we heard aggressive retool and then they kind of pivoted to stabilizing year, which is totally the opposite of aggressive retool.
Huge problem. Huge communicate. Okay. Okay. So if you go back to our podcast where we were talking, even prior to that press conference, I mean, the reason I was mad about that press conference because I'm going, what are you talking about? Your only option is a stabilizing year. So I'm sitting there going like, what are you even saying? Other people are going, okay, he's going to give us an aggressive rebuild.
You really shouldn't be doing that.
Exactly. Then he goes through, doesn't do that, does a stabilizing year, and then goes, oh, no, we're stabilizing. It's like, yeah, like you have no cap space. You gave up on all the cap space. You weren't able to bring in the superstar because you didn't have the cap space. You have an endless amount of questions with also a brand new coaching staff in general. What are you talking about?
It's puzzling because
but stabilizing doesn't make any. What are you building on? Everything is broken. Do you see what I'm saying? Like there was no other path other than stabilizing. So why did you sell anybody else but that? And I think that's part of the problem.
That's what I mean. Like, why'd you communicate the aggressive retool when it was clear that couldn't get pulled off? And if you are going to pull it off, you're just going to mortgage the future so bad that the pieces that you do acquire from doing that retool aren't going to mean much anyway because there's nothing really surrounding them. So like, I don't know. Not a great course of action for them at all.
It's deceptive, or it's that too many cooks in the kitchen thing. It's like, I experienced this at work, is like when things go wrong, people get their hands and stuff. And then, in my opinion, it creates more problems a lot of times than it saves. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, and you could see it. I mean, it comes out in press conferences, and I think even some of the players, like, I mean, like back channels or behind the scenes or whatever, you hear, certain players, they're not happy. And it's players that you don't want to be hearing that from. You know what I mean? It's like, if it was, no offense, Nate Thompson, if it was Nate Thompson that was here and was like, hey, this organization's messed up. Yeah. Like, all right, well, you're not going to be here anymore. But if it's like guys, I don't know, with longer contracts, aren't happy here, guys you think that are going to be the cornerstones of this franchise for years to come, and you're hearing, from multiple sources that, this guy's not really happy in Philadelphia, or, who knows if he's going to be here in a couple of years kind of thing. And it's like, whoa, like the dysfunction has trickled down to the players is what I'm saying. Like
it's always top down. It's always top down. And I think that's why it's usually blamed top down. It doesn't even matter if it's always your fault. It's always your responsibility for one, but it typically is not your fault, but it's a trickle down effect. Either you weren't able to stop it or somebody above you is doing it, which also could be the case. And I've worked for Comcast. And if they're freaking out because they think something's wrong and they don't really know what they're talking about, which in the hockey world, I imagine they probably don't, and they start throwing a bunch of suggestions in there, that's how I could see us getting to a point where, it's not only a bunch of moves that aren't cohesive, but they also aren't very good. Having said that, I will say that we have to still give it an opportunity to see if it sees itself out. Otherwise, in my opinion, at least the awakening would be is a lot of people will lose their jobs, and deservingly so.
Yeah, based on the terrible results.
Would you guys say that? Well, I mean, I've been like Jim, you grew up in the area too. I've been a Philly sports fan for a while. What we have seen digress here, the image of the Flyers that I've grown up and loved watching, and the respect that I have for that brand. And I'm not saying that Chuck Fletcher's or anybody, like, I'm not picking on one person, but I never grew up with a team that had this vibe. I remember there were times where like the Phillies had that at times back in the day. Maybe there were times where like the Sixers kind of felt like that a little bit. Did not last long. Even trust the process, dude, didn't last long. Like you can't do that here. Right? I'm not crazy.
No, not with the Flyers. I mean, because number one, it's such a niche.
No.
It's like a cult following, number one, of a fan base, right? Like everybody goes crazy for the Eagles. Everybody goes crazy for the Sixers. You know, the Phillies, the weather gets nice, everyone goes crazy for the Phillies. Flyers are a little different, right? They have a cult fan base, and what does that fan base want? They want to see wins, right? They want to see playoffs. They want to hope for a Stanley Cup, or at least dream of, potentially being in it. And when it's like this, a lot of people, a lot of hardcore cult following fans are getting turned off. It's I never thought we would see this in our lifetime. Like I don't want to say that it's not depressed, is not the right word, but I'm so turned off by the organization because it's just not what we grew up with. It's the complete opposite of what we grew up with.
It doesn't have that family vibe to it, like that warmth that it had, that even when they were like bad, it was still like, hey, like, it's kind of like, we're figuring it out, now it's kind of like, it's almost like there's like a front door and everybody's like, hey, everything's all good, nothing to see. It's like the cop from South Park, nothing to see here,
yeah.
And
no light,
chopping off chickens' heads in the back, and you're like, what? I don't know, but you know what I mean? Like, it feels like that at times. But if I am being more practical, there's a part of me, it's like, how can I say like Brent Flair is incompetent? Like, I've seen the guy talk, I've seen him draft, I've seen the result. It's like, I try to be like, okay, there's some stuff wrong here, but there's no way everything is wrong. It can't be everyone.
That's the one I think aspect of the organization. You can say whatever you want about Fletcher with the free agent signing, just the way he's managing the cap, managing some of his assets, but the drafting, at least for me so far, has been pretty good. Like, you haven't seen some of the younger guys, but like, I just go back to the track record of some of the same scouts that they've brought in over from them from their days in Minnesota, Fletcher and Flair. But I mean, a lot of that Minnesota team, and they've had some success, were those guys' draft picks. So I mean, you have to give credit where credit's due, right? Like, you might not be good at something, you might be good at something else. It looks like they're pretty good at drafting. I mean, you got to see where it plays out for the Flyers, obviously, to see that it's like a thing that's happened with sustained, success versus the past to now. But I mean, at least for me, I think, it'll be interesting to see with a lot of the prospects they've taken, because they do look like they are, impressive in their own junior leagues, but it has to translate obviously to the NHL.
Well, you worry about it. Does that hit a wall here every time? Is that the pattern?
Is
they
there
come in here?
Yeah, they can't develop them, exactly.
And then they stagnate here, which I think there's some case to be made there. I think there is.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I actually think back to the AV thing, and I remember like reading a bunch of. We might have actually talked about this, but the Rangers fans were not very happy with AV, and they said that a lot of their young players like stagnated under him.
That kind of happened with the Flyers.
Right, and player I think
dismissed it too. I remember the fan base. The fan base was like, "Oh, that's bullshit." AV's
look,
a great coach
because it's not always consistent. You really don't know. Sometimes you talk shit on a guy, he's Craig Berube, and he gets you a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what
Until
I'm saying?
It happens, it's sports, right? Anything's technically fucking possible, but
that's the problem. But wait, who was I just talking about? I lost.
Vigneault.
Yeah, Vigneault. But the track record there, I think about a guy like Buchnevich. And he's a guy who he got away from AV, and he was already good, and he hit like another level.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, like, I don't know what happened with AV. I've been complaining about him for a little bit now, and I was screaming about firing him for a long time, since last season. I didn't want him to be coach of this team for this whole season. I didn't think he should have been coach of this team. I'm trying to figure out, like, was the damage, and I don't think it's just him, and that's asinine. But did this coaching staff, and I would say the two guys who were axed earlier, one of which was the one guy I never wanted to see coach Flyers, which was Michel Therrien. Like, did these guys actually cause more damage than we anticipate? And is Chuck Fletcher responsible for that? Because he also didn't recognize that, and he also brought them in and hired them. But I feel like
in
to
a
some
sense,
degree,
yeah. In a sense.
sorry, go ahead. I don't know if you guys want to say more about that, but I feel like they did.
I would say for sure. I mean, if you're the guy hiring the guy who messes everybody up, you're guilty. I know you brought him in.
Yeah, you didn't recognize the fact that he was not going to either mesh well with your roster, or that he was going to have that effect, or the reasoning maybe that, let's say, okay, with that hire, sure, he might bring out the team to play better in a certain period of time, but maybe he's one of those coaches that after a little bit, the message wears thin, it wears thin, it wears thin,
Well,
and then guys don't want to put up with it. And that's a thing with a lot of coaches, right? They have a shelf life. And I mean, you could talk about some who have ones that are longer, some that are shorter. I mean, for the Flyers with their new coach in Tortorella, they're hoping obviously to be longer, and it's shown in the past that, I mean, he has had longer coaching tenures, despite what some people would say. But I think that's the Flyers' main goal, is at least with the Tortorella hiring, and it seems like that's pretty much the only thing they can really focus on from their offseason, because they didn't really do much else. So that's what they're kind of promoting, is really the Tortorella hiring and then D'Angelo, right? Those are the two big things. But with the Tortorella hiring, I just think that, I mean, they want him to build some sort of identity that just has been ravaged for, I mean, 2 to 3 seasons since the bubble, really. Yeah.
Personality-wise, he seems night and day of AV to me.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's a motivator.
Let me throw this out to you guys. Yeah. Do you guys think, and again, we're talking top down here, okay? If we agree that top down creates a problem, okay?
Okay.
I think it is. I think you can go almost every type of organization, not just sports, like everything. It's usually top down. It's like 80-20 top down. But if you look at if you look at where the Flyers were trending, even prior to AV, look at Hackstall. They had some moments where where everybody's like, all right, well, they're supposed to be getting better, and we're not getting better. And then everybody's like, okay, well, get rid of this coach, right? And then get rid of this GM. And the GM they got rid of him because obviously he had a bad relationship with Comcast, and obviously Comcast isn't very good at what they do either, right? So there's an issue there, right? And then all of a sudden they bring in AV, and like all those issues are kind of quelled because there's a new GM who isn't really doing anything. And that was a smart move, in my opinion. Come in, you evaluate. He didn't really do anything. He just kind of added to the group, right? And then you brought in a coach who really just had to pick up a group that was already together, right? And it's just kind of like, hey, we're already here. And they added some guys. And did he just kind of like strike gold? Because quite frankly, the team was actually pretty good, like on paper. Like, and they were just good. Like, they were just a good team. They had everything they needed. They had the defenseman. They had you know what I mean? Like, they had Niskanen with Provorov. They had a goaltender in Carter Hart, right? They had the 1-2 punch of Hayes and Couturier, and they still had Giroux and Voracek. Like, he just had talent. Like, yeah, and people here don't really think that way, but they just had a good team.
They were did a good have a talented team,
and they did well. And then slowly, as he took over the team, they did worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, and then you had younger guys too at first have career years like Konechny, Provorov as well to complement like the veterans, right?
Well,
so like it ended up being a perfect storm.
Was that like the natural swing of where the players were going?
Yeah,
and it wasn't like it was like Hextall's like long, slow buildup, right? So you took the slow buildup of Hextall off, and you threw in the toxicity of the new ones, and it ratcheted up because it gave these guys with talent opportunity at first. Right. But then the culture and everything that took over was not very stable.
Yeah,
and
kind of
slowly degraded what we had. And like, I think that's a little bit of an excuse, like what I'm doing for the players. But I do try to think of it as like, how does a team do so well? Like, they looked legitimately great, especially in that second half. They were winning home to home battles against good teams, stingy teams.
Yeah.
And they were still doing it. I was like, this is, and even you can get upset at them about the Canadians. The Canadians went to the finals the following year. You know what I mean? The Canadians were obviously a tough team to play against. They lost to a good team in the Islanders.
Yeah.
Sure, they weren't like the best team. They would show they were a competent team. And then just to completely degrade, I don't know.
Well, it's either they were actually
trying to figure out why.
It's hard to pinpoint, I think. It's either they were actually a decent team and pretty good, and one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference at that point, or it was an anomaly and it was kind of bullshit, which I mean, I lean to think that it's somewhere in between. They might have not been actually as good and they were playing a little bit over their head, but they also aren't as bad as what we've seen, and they're kind of just decent, right? But like it's hard to, I don't know. I think
Well,
it's hard to
I think
paint a
the
picture.
COVID. This is like the one thing I said about businesses during COVID. And this is definitely going to be probably a mean thing to say, because it's a horrible thing to happen to people. But a lot of businesses that weren't doing that well, they were the first ones to go during COVID. You know what I mean? A lot of organizations that weren't run that well in the NHL, they were the first ones to be noticed. For instance, AV was not ready for COVID at all. At all.
Oh, yeah.
He had no plan for how to run his practices. He made excuses about how you didn't have a computer plan? You guys didn't have like an IT team? You know, I'm not, like, I'm kind of like joking, but I'm really not, because that's what I do. I work remote. And I was like, I know AV. I'm not trying to be an asshole, but like, and maybe Torts wouldn't have been ready either, but like, you weren't ready. You didn't want to use Zoom. You didn't want to use this stuff. You wanted to do everything in person. You probably got frustrated that you couldn't do it your way. This is all my guess, but that's kind of what it looked like to me as an outsider. That it was just I don't know, a guy who just wasn't there. Like it was not running the team as efficiently as we really needed him to. And because he had the reputation and the salesmanship of it, it was fine, because he is a smart guy. He does have a pedigree of being a good coach, but was he a good coach when he was here? I don't know. I didn't see much evidence of that outside of the first year.
For like a 7-month period, yes. Beyond that, probably not.
We were actually talking about this Monday. That was
okay.
those couple months, or even, I mean, they looked good, right?
Yeah.
If you think back, like,
Looked
so they would
good.
They would take games over the longer the game went on. Like,
Yeah,
first period was
exactly.
always kind of like even, and then like midway through
Second
the
and
second,
third.
yeah, they just started dominating. It was like, holy crap! Like, if they can keep this trajectory and keep improving as the year goes on, we could, they'll make the playoffs and we'll see what happens. Then they went on that 9-game winning streak. And I'm like, Stanley Cup, like, there's nobody stopping them except COVID stopped them.
Yeah.
And then
That was the worst thing to
here we
happen to
are.
them, really. If they would have been able to roll through, it would have been maybe a different situation. Who knows?
Cursed,
Yeah.
man.
Uh,
Something happened, man. This team does feel a little cursed. I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
In
with
a
the amount
sense.
of the injuries, the fact that it's happening on all fronts, right? It's not just like injury, it's like injuries, player problems, accusations, GM issues, coaching issues, like
But
media media
but
with player problems. It's
to
like
tie
everything.
it all back, Yariv, does that come to the top down thing where, like,
I think always.
is it actually a top down issue where, the people you've put in place spawn the fact that, the team was in a good position and they just could not oversee it to move forward from there. I
I
don't know.
think, look, I worked for Comcast, and I've talked about this before. I've been in the room with Brian Roberts. I worked with the entire C-suite. I saw them regularly. I don't know them well, but I know the energy of Comcast. Stable is not the term I would use for it. Financially, sure, fantastic from that aspect. But does it bring the stabilizing force that an Ed Snyder, who's like a dad figure to every single
Would
person in the
Yeah.
organization? No. But this is why I talked about John Tortorella, because he is dad figure material. This is the one thing where I don't agree with people on what they think that Tortorella is going to do. Maybe it's a terminology. Maybe I'm talking semantics. But when people talk about that he's going to hold people accountable, I don't think that that's his specialty. I don't think that's what he's being brought in here. I think every coach we've had has held players accountable, including Hackstall, who benched players that we like, who are even performing players that we're like, you're not even supposed to bench this guy, and you're benching him. I think what Tortorella brings is he brings an attention to detail. He manages the person. He doesn't micromanage the hockey. This is my guess. Again, I don't know the guy. He manages the person. I think that can be really annoying to some people because they don't want you to focus on them because they just want to do what they want to do. But I think the entire time that Tortorella is going to be here, that he's going to have his coaches reading off to you all the plays. They're going to be working to you like teachers, and he's going to be running like psychological exams on you, trying to figure out why you're not giving 100% at all times.
And it's like a motivational tactic almost, right? Because it's like, why aren't you doing this? Let's see why, and then let's do certain things that I want to implement. Let's see if you can do it, and all that type
I'll
of
tell
deal,
you,
really.
I manage a team, one of the things that I think about the most is how to just enable the people
Yeah,
on the team
pretty
underneath
much.
me to work as fast, as efficiently, as carefree as possible.
That's
Yeah.
what you want. I mean, so if you're a coach or if you're a leader and you know you need to get the most out of your team,
Yeah.
you need to figure out how to get through each individual
Yeah.
player.
You got to
Right? 'Cause
understand the actual person, not just the hockey player.
exactly. You need to know what buttons to push because James' buttons are different than Yariv's buttons, and Yariv's buttons
Exactly.
are different than Vasili's buttons. So you need to figure that out. You know, how can I get the most out of this guy? I need to figure him out.
I feel like that's a Tortorella specialty almost.
So do I. That's what
Yeah.
I'm excited to see because I want to see who buys into that. And I would
Exactly.
assume whoever doesn't buy into that just doesn't want to form that type of relationship with the coach. I mean, maybe I'm assuming there,
Yeah.
but
No, I think that's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that those are the people he butts heads with, are the people who don't want that. They want
They want
just
the veil of, hey, you're my coach. I'm a hockey player.
I'll
you know,
show
let's-
up.
Right.
You tell me
Exactly.
where to skate, I skate. Otherwise, don't bother
Right.
me.
That's the job part. Yeah, I don't want to be personal with the coach
Like-
or whatever.
But it's
Like,
like any job with anybody, I would say, though, right? Like if you develop a personal connection with the individuals that you're
Well-
working with, you may, perform better in
I
certain
think- okay.
situations. So
I think it's different, and this is gonna get a little philosophical here, so hang on to your hats a little bit. But there's two different types of games, right? There's and this is like a Simon Sinek thing, if you guys know who he is. I brought him up here before, but there's a concept called, like the thing in sports is like you're trying to win in sports.
yeah, obviously.
You really want to win, but in other things, like it's an infinite game, so you're just managing personalities to like long term. In this case, you're trying to get the most out of people for this short kind of period of time to like get together. And I feel like that is going to be Tortorella's specialty here. Is he's got to, like I said this before, it's got to be an us versus them. It's got to be an us versus the world type mentality for this to turn around. It has to be a guy who, like you said, individually.
He's already planting the seeds of that in some of his interviews that I've kind of seen.
He's
that
already
saying, like,
started arguments with the media.
yeah, exactly. Well, he said, well,
He doesn't even know these guys.
Yeah, he's saying like, oh,
Relevant.
Certain players like aren't, why were they brought in, or did you like approve, bringing certain players? Well, why are you already asking me about this? Like, I of course anybody that's on this roster, I'm going to be happy to work with them, things like that. So
yeah, well, I think like we were saying earlier, right? Like some guys are going to want to come in, just do their thing, and other guys. But here's the thing: a guy like Tortorella, it wouldn't work in Tampa Bay right now. Like you can't bring Tortorella to the Tampa Bay Lightning after John Cooper didn't make it, on his fifth Stanley Cup run, and you have all of these star players, and then Tortorella is going to come in there and start giving you psychological exams on your top guys. They're going to be like, "Yo, leave me alone. I've already proven that I can do this. I don't really need that type of right." Like, and I think that's why Tortorella didn't work in Vancouver. He walks in a situation was already a good team. There's already established culture. It's dominated by these two twins. They didn't even dislike you. They're nice guys, but they're kind of like, "Yo, dude, I don't need the psychological exam. We're playoff team already."
Yeah, we're both 90-point players. Like,
I think that's where Tortorella can't work. But a team like ours right now,
or even like a Columbus was, where they didn't really know where they were going. They didn't really have the top end talent or anything, but they need to work hard to grind their wins out.
Yeah. So. And absolutely. And I think that's why a guy like Chris Pronger, adding him into the locker room with Mike Richards, who I think was a pretty decent captain, obviously on the ice, better captain in the locker room. I think to some degree, I don't think he was like a bad dude at all, but I don't think he had like Chris Pronger level presence. But I think you add that guy into that mix, which is already a good team. And it's like, boom. And that was a player doing it. But if you try to add a coach and you do that in like Toronto with Babcock, like you see, like there's problems with these big personality coaches too, but I think Tortorella in this case, and you look at, and I want to talk about Travis Konechny specifically, you look at the guys we have on this team, guys who need redemption, right? Provorov, TK, Coots to some degree. I wouldn't say he needs it, but he's going to do that on his own. But you know what I mean? Like he's got to prove he's healthy. Hayes, who I think has to live up to a big contract and a larger role now. Like other guys on this team who, even Frost, like guys who need a redemption story, who are right now.
What?
There's a lot.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. This is the guy. That's what he specializes in. So that's what I'm saying. Like if they brought somebody in, at least they brought in the guy who specializes in that. Yeah. And that's what I personally, I need to see that fixed before they do anything. Like, yeah, I would have been happy with Johnny Gaudreau. I'm happy with any good player joins, but that's not my focus. My focus is this team is fucking broken. Like, show me they can play hockey. Yeah. Show me they can play hockey as a unit.
The structure in their game. I'm
open to trade anybody.
The last 2 seasons, the complete structure of their game is gone. Like, the forwards don't support the defense.
That's not a talent issue.
But obviously there's some aspect of coaching that either can't get through to them to execute, or I don't know. But you gotta hope Tortorella can fix it, right?
So that's why I brought up like what happened between the time that AV took over to now, that things degraded so much that these guys who were flying high confidence wise are so low now that like the relationship between everybody is like broken.
We're probably not privy to the answers. There's probably some sort of confrontational locker room, something in the exactly right. There's probably a lot of things at play. Sure.
But go ahead, Jim. Please.
No, I think this is my opinion, but
it's all.
I think the players kind of know. They know what's going on with the organization, and you guys know what it's like when you work for a dysfunctional company or whatever. We've all had, jobs where we're like, this place is effed up.
Yeah.
I think the players have that sense, where they're like, shit, I signed here for 5-6 years. These guys are messed up here. I mean, how would you feel? Like, how could you go to work every day, like excited because you know that your situation is so shitty, and, it's not like you can just quit, I mean, you could ask for a trade, but
that's the one caveat that I say, that with the winning element in sports is like this weird wild card that exists in it's not in the work world. Like, you're not actually winning, maybe a little bit in sales, I guess, but like you're not really winning, you're kind of just sustaining, you're staying alive as a business. But in sports, you're like winning. And like, for instance, if we just start winning next year, if we're in first place do you think that everybody will be upset? Like the problems will still be there. You know what I'm saying? They'll still be there.
But they're not picking everything apart like we are now.
Exactly. So winning, but it won't solve the problems.
Wins mask everything, right? You don't hear about all this stuff when a team is being successful in the ice. So.
But hopefully there are good people I do believe that there are still good people in this organization. And I do understand why people want the old heads out. I do get that, but I honestly, a part of me has like this weird gut thing where it's like they might be the only thing stopping us from going completely off the rails, which people might not know either. Like
exactly.
We don't know what kind of ideas are thrown out.
But also, you don't know the influence. Like, I mean, okay, let's say you're a senior advisor, a la Paul Holmgren, Bobby Clark. Like, is anybody really any of us right now? Like, do we know?
I mean, what does Dave Scott recommend?
That too, yeah. Like, do we know the influence that any of these people have on Chuck Fletcher's decisions, or is it just him and his staff, and he's gauging their opinions, but then all the opinions rumbled into one kind of.
I think that's the reality of what we're getting.
Yeah, kind of make and formulate a plan that just doesn't have much direction because you can't please and you can't kind of
But do you trust anybody?
Do everything at once.
Who? Okay, if I had to tell you, you are now Dave Scott.
Okay? Yeah,
you are now Dave Scott. Brian Roberts hired you to be Dave Scott. You know the people in this organization. Let's say the way you know now, right? Obviously, you can meet people and like let's just be Fantasyland for a little bit. Who of this organization would you go and talk to? Because let's talk real business world here. You're not going to just fire everybody from people. Oh, all these people are assholes. Get rid of them. No, you're going to go interview and have conversation. Who are the people instinctively that you'd go into this organization that you could potentially trust their opinion?
You're probably going to go to, the president that was Paul Holmgren formerly, Bobby Clark, those types of guys that have been around forever, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Essentially.
Dean Lombardi. Okay. Yeah, I'm honestly, I'm being honest because I know a lot of people sit back and they go, why are they even in the room? Who else are you going to talk to? Danny Briere. Like, maybe that is a problem. Maybe we are lacking enough outside voices, new one. Maybe that, but like, I'm talking about hockey people or man, woman, whatever. The people who have been successful around the league.
But I don't know how much influence, like, how much influence do those guys that are surrounding the actual general manager and stuff, how much do they have? I think that's just something we're not aware of. So it's hard to kind of pinpoint where the actual problem is, really.
I'm just saying, like, who do you talk to though? Like,
yeah. probably those guys that we mentioned, I would say.
They're the most experienced on paper. If you don't know what you don't know the people
All
coming
former
in,
general managers at certain
it's
points in the
immediately
NHL.
you're going to talk to. And quite
Exactly.
frankly, people might not like to hear this. They deserve that respect. They're former players, coaches, GMs, some of which have taken teams to finals, right? Who have dealt in some of the most intense situations.
Yeah, it's a hard, like you said, like it's a hard situation to kind of unlayer. I would say.
If you look at some of their records on paper, like what's Bobby Clark's record as a GM?
Good,
probably pretty good.
Pretty good.
same with Paul Holmgren.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Like, so it's like I don't know. I feel like it's kind of catch-22 where it's like I get why they keep going to the same people, but
man, sometimes you need a fresh idea
from our perspective
as well.
Well, from our perspective though, and I think the point of what I was trying to say is that from our perspective, we don't feel that. Like I trusted Hextall. I don't know how you felt, Jim. I know that Vasili, you probably did, but I felt comfortable with Hextall, even though it was like a slow burn. For
At first, the thing that
scare me.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, I didn't like all the draft picks that he made. Like there were certain picks where I think I would have went with somebody else, like that DeBrincat like situation. You got to pick DeBrincat, man. Like I don't know what you're doing, but like. Personally, I mean, for Hextall, like at least his plan, he laid it out, and he actually like stuck to the plan. So if you're looking at it logically, sequentially, you could say, well, he said he was going to do this. Look at all the things he's doing that match what he said he was going to do. Yeah. Hence, that's where the trust comes from. Chuck Fletcher, I don't know what the plan's ever been. Like he hasn't really. Obviously, the plan's been to contend, but then when the team's as bad as it's been for 2 seasons, it's kind of hard to be like, well, we still can contend. You know what I mean? So then, what's the plan from that? Right, and then that's the pivot that we haven't really seen, where like he's like, oh, we're still going to contend, but then you go into stabilizing, and there's your pivot, and you're kind of like, well, is Chuck Fletcher a kind of GM that can do a year like that and can be successful? Because even in Minnesota, the teams that were under him, they were always trying to win. So you have to factor that in, right? Like, what kind of GM is he? There's GMs for different stages of different teams, obviously.
True.
I'm hoping Torts can be a guy that. So I know we're thinking he's going to change attitudes of the players and whatnot, but I'm also thinking, I'm hoping that too. Like, I'm hoping he's not a guy that's going to take any BS, right?
No.
So you need a guy like that to hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that he holds some of the managerial guys
if like they're doing some bullshit behind the scenes potentially.
Right. And you can tell people, hey, I think you're doing a shitty job, and still be respectful. So,
of course, yeah.
You know, I don't know what it's like behind the scenes, or who talks to who, or if Tortorella even talks to the advisors or whoever. But I would hope that, you know, he would have the stones to say, hey, like, this is dysfunction here, guys. Like, too many cooks in the kitchen. We're never going to get anything done if this continues the way it is. You know, I think. I was really happy.
A straight shooter, so
yeah,
I think
exactly.
I don't mean to cut you off, Jim, but I just want to add to your point. I think we already saw a little bit of that when Tortorella publicly said that the locker room is fractured, and then Fletcher publicly went, "Well, I don't know if it's fractured."
Right.
And I'm like, dude, yeah, it is.
Your new coach just fucking said it is, so.
And it's so obvious. And your coach just like publicly went, "Oh yeah, 2 seconds. This place fractured." You know what I mean? He's like, wait, don't tell people that. He's like,
see, but that's the honesty part. Like,
that's what you need sometimes.
I don't think it makes them look. We all know it kind of is. Like we hear it's clicky this, clicky that.
It better be. If it's not, then what's the excuse?
If it's not, they're just bad.
Right. And so it's like, as fans,
probably worse, to be honest.
Right. We just want honesty. And so like. If the GM came out and be like, yeah, like the locker room could be better. I mean, he doesn't have to agree to a T and say, yeah, it's fractured. He could say, you know, the atmosphere and the team chemistry could be better. And I think bringing in a guy like Tortorella is going to help, you know, change that, you know, and back up his hire instead of he just immediately went against them. And it's like, well, maybe Fletcher really didn't want Torts because, you know, they had the whole firm that came in and had to hire him and all that.
Well, think about it. Torts is like really blunt, right? And if you're trying to be more nuanced, like he's not going to do that. No. AV would do that. AV can give you that's my point. Like AV had the salesmanship. He was super charming. He came in. He's got the great answers.
Different personalities.
Torts is charming in his own way. Like, don't be wrong. He's a good public speaker and stuff. But that's not what this guy is. This is like a mad scientist. Like, you're kind of like letting this guy off the leash in here. And I don't mean he's a crazy person. Like, I think I actually would get along with him really well. Like, I think I personally would love to play for John Tortorella. Like, he's my type of human.
Someone who's played, I mean, that's the type of coach you want to play for. You want to play for a guy that's going to defend you as a player. You want to play for a coach that's going to, ask something for you in the room and then stab you in the back in front of the media when it doesn't go the right way.
He's got to be.
That's kind of what Alain Vigneault did to the team.
He's got to tread lightly here, though. I will say that to some degree with Torts, because he's going to be a challenging figure here.
Yeah, definitely.
Angry city.
Yeah. So here's my thing. I think, he's going to be honest, and sometimes honesty rubs people the wrong way. But I think the majority of us, when I think Philadelphia, I think honest, hardworking town, right? We want honesty, and we want our players to, even if they lose 82 games, if they're busting their ass every night. I mean, we saw it. When was it? Back in 09, 2010, or whenever they stunk. I forget.
07.
Oh, 07. Yeah.
I mean, they stunk.
They were the worst team in the league.
They were the worst team in the league.
They
never got Patrick Kane, though.
They were fun to watch still, though.
Yeah.
I would turn them on every night. This team this year, they were the opposite. I couldn't. If I wasn't going to games, I wouldn't have watched them.
Go back to what we said when we said as a top-down thing. Who was not the GM? Who was the owner of the team? It was Ed Snyder. There was a different energy around this team, even though things were bad. There was a calmness. There's a stability. Like, hey, we're gonna get out of this.
Yeah.
Just no longer around. Essentially,
there's no real stability with this organization from an emotional standpoint.
Yeah, but also I would say too, like, just with players and just in terms of like honesty, like you were saying, Jim, like if you're a player, I think a lot of the players on the team could probably admit the fact the team's been garbage the last like couple seasons. So I think if Tortorella's coming in questioning guys that might be a little more established, I think they might take that the wrong way at first, but then they'll look, down and kind of say, well, why wouldn't he be questioning us, even though I am like established and I have shown I can score in the past? What have I done lately? Right. So like, I think, if you're being realistic, that's what you have to hope a lot of the players kind of, I think, accept with him. Right. We'll see how it clashes, how it kind of meshes with a lot of the guys. But I think, at least from a player perspective, if I was a player in a situation like that and I had a coach being honest with me, telling me, exactly how it's going to be from day one, that's what I would probably want. I would assume that's what most people would want from a boss. So, so you got to hope for.
So let's talk about one guy, because we actually didn't really get to get into itself. And Vasili, if you can pull up the statistics, because I know you probably have them in front of you, but Travis Konechny's stats for the past few years, we do have to add the caveat that some of the people he's competing with had injuries throughout this time, but this is a guy that I am very interested to see what happens in this upcoming season,
especially under Tortorella.
Yes, what happens with John Tortorella, and as now TK is relied upon to be even more of an impact player on this team than he's ever had to be. I don't think necessarily he's ever been asked to have this type of role before. I think it was always kind of like a plus. Now it's kind of like, hey, we need you to be a top line winger.
Yeah, we need you to be a top producer on the team and almost kind of fill some of the production you're losing with Claude Giroux, which it'll be interesting to see how he kind of takes that role in. But basically the stat was, and it was credit to Jordan Hall. He's great. Lots of great content from him all the time from NBC SN Philly there. But Travis Konechny's team ranks over the last 3 seasons, first in points with 147, first in assists with 96. First in even strength points, 103. First in power play points, 44. First in penalties drawn, 68. Second in power play goals, 12th. Tied for second even strength goals, 39. Some of the goal totals, you could just say the team hasn't had a great goal score, maybe. But in terms of the other stuff, it's pretty impressive, right, for a team that's been bad, and also just pretty impressive. And it's just kind of hilarious, I would say, because I'd say a lot of the fan base shits on Konechny a lot and kind of is very down on him, even though there's talent there with the player. But just to see the fact that he's first and leading the team in all these categories is just, I think it's conducive to the fact that he does have a larger impact than maybe some people might lead themselves to believe. And at least for me, and the way I kind of watch hockey and kind of dissect it, is if you're a winger, there's only so much you can create by yourself unless you're like a generational type talent like a Patrick Kane or something of that ilk, right? So like if you're a winger like Konechny, you need a good centerman to play with to kind of almost spark your offense, but also help you defensively so you can get out of your own zone and then make those exits. Best season he ever had playing with Sean Couturier, when he had that 70-point season or close
Was
to
that
70 points.
AV's first year?
Yeah, AV's first
Yeah.
year, right? So like I just look at the fact that he hasn't played next to a healthy Sean Couturier, and who knows if he's going to be healthy Couturier. Obviously, we're kind of forecasting that, but I think him getting back to playing with Couturier will be the best for him in terms of producing at a higher rate for sure. Well, what do you think about that stat, guys? You guys want to jump into it?
Yeah, Jim, your thoughts?
I hope that Vasili's right in everything that he just said.
Yeah.
I do.
I know.
But, Travis Konechny, I don't know. He never really did it for me, even when he was scoring 61 points in 66 games. He was always for me a very good second line guy. Like if Travis Konechny's on your second line, you probably have a pretty good team. Right. And it's not a knock to say he's a good second line player. It's not a knock. I promise.
Agreed.
No. I agree with that. You need a second line player and you need a good second line.
Second line players,
Right.
top 6 forward in the NHL.
Exactly.
They're very rare.
I just don't think that he's a top line guy. I think if Travis Konechny's playing on your top line, probably not a very good team. Not a knock. Again, I think he just needs to be your second line guy, maybe a guy that can flex into the top line once in a while when you got to shake things up. I would like to see more from him for what he's making. 16 goals and 79. I know the team didn't have centers for a good portion of the year, so it's really tough for me to
And the power play
blame
was
him.
a fucking
Power
joke.
play was abysmal. I mean, they were missing 5 centers, 5 NHL rostered centers at one point.
That doesn't include Lazinski.
Like we've said, Jim, like we said this, if anybody's listening to the podcast, like when any team in the league's missing that many centers are going to be bad, man.
Right, for sure. And Travis Konechny's game was a symptom of that. I will say towards the end of the year, he seemed to gain confidence. After AV was shown the door, it took him maybe a month or so, but he got going a little bit. I think what I'm afraid of with Konechny is Tortorella is another systems kind of coach, right? Konechny, I'm not sure is a system player.
That might be true.
Yeah,
I think he's kind of a guy that does
wants to play rover. Yeah,
yeah, and so a couple things there. That's perfectly fine. If you can get the best out of Travis Konechny with letting him do his own thing, great. Not sure he's good enough of a player to be able to do that, right? I'm just not sure.
Yeah,
that's fair.
And then the other thing is, if Tortorella is a systems coach and you want to get all your team playing the same way, is Travis Konechny part of that plan? Can he fit into your mold, or will that hurt a player like him, right?
Yeah.
And I think AV tried to do that with him. And Vasili, you mentioned he had that great first season under Alain Vigneault. He didn't really fit in the system. He didn't look right under Alain Vigneault after that until he was fired and then he started to come back into his own. Yeah. I don't know. He's a guy that I think we need to keep an eye on. And I don't know if he's going to go anywhere type thing, but
he's an X factor. He's an X factor to this team, to your point. So this is the way I kind of see it, because I agree with what you're saying. I don't think Travis Konechny is a top line winger either. I think it's very difficult to have that label on you, and you typically have to do what Giroux has done, or Voracek, or Couturier,
the top 6 player.
You have to show that every single year you are one of the best players on your team, pretty much night in and night out. Like even Cam Atkinson, like he was a top line player.
He doesn't have the consistency though.
But even you can make the case he's not a top line player either. He's had it in his time.
I would say the way to label a top line guy is, at least for me, like consistency. If you're getting almost close to a point a night, that would be a top line player.
Like if TK hit that 60-point mark and hit 60 to 70 points every year, you can make the case. Yeah. Okay, and even then, the ceiling point-wise, it's still borderline.
A little low,
right?
Low, yeah.
Like a guy who's definitive top-line player, say 80-point player in the league, right?
80-point player, yeah. 75 to 90, you can make the case, I'd say.
So I agree, and And then that 1 year he had, that is like a 75 point pace or whatever that he had, right?
Yeah.
So you look at that and you're like, okay, but then he didn't do it every year. And I agree with that statement. I think the way I differ from other people is I think I'm just more patient. I don't agree with everybody that he is developed. I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree that Provorov is developed. I don't even agree Sanheim is developed. I didn't think Scott Lawton was developed when he continued to get better 2-3 years afterwards. I don't agree with any of that. So when I see Travis Konechny and I go, he's not a top line winger. I can't disagree with that. It's a true statement because you don't look at him and go, if Travis Konechny is on my top line, that makes it. He's not a Panarin. He's not a guy who I know is going to be in the top 20 in points in the NHL. He's not that guy. Can he be that guy? I still believe there is a chance to be that guy. I think a guy of that size, around 25, 26, that is the window now to see if he can hit another level. If not, he will be a good second line player for his career, maybe have one jump year, and that'll be cool. And honestly, that's where a lot of first round picks go, especially later first round picks. That's pretty good for a late first round pick. If he can hit another level, though, like when Brad Marchand did in his mid-20s, that's where I'm looking for that now. Can the right coach and the right opportunity create that? I think there is room for that. Do I think he has proven that he is that guy? No. I think he's shown hints of that. But to Jim's point, you cannot call him a top line winger yet. You actually can't really call anybody on this team a top line winger right now.
Which is probably kind of a problem, I guess.
What is the problem? But it is the winning by committee. The only player that we have right now that is obviously a top line player is Sean Couturier.
Yeah.
Every single other person is either a top 6 mix or a middle 6 forward, which is still a recipe for a good team, but it's not a recipe for a great team.
No, but you know what the interesting thing actually with that point to kind of jump off Yariv, at least for me, is that like it does create a lot of opportunity. I mean, if you're a younger guy and you have talent, I mean, you scored at lower levels, things like that, like there is an opportunity for you to run with the ice time, with the opportunities that could be given to you. Like if you're let's say a Travis Konechny now and you start out the season and I don't know, somehow, you're doing well in the power play, like that's going to be your spot for the remainder of the year. Who else is going to take it from you, right? So like there's opportunity for ice time as a player, opportunity, I mean, to potentially develop your game with that ice time under a John Tortorella, but obviously it might not always go that way, right? We'll see what happens. I think it's going to be interesting, and to your point, Jim, it'll be interesting just to the fact that if a lot of these guys don't show a step or they don't regain that prior form, are they going to be around next season? And I think that's the question we kind of have to really ponder, right? Because I think this is more of a season where like you have guys like who performed not as great in the past 2 seasons, obviously during the almost 2 of the last worst seasons probably in franchise history, you could argue. If those guys don't regain that form, I think they're getting an opportunity to do that, to get regain trade value, things like that. Potentially, that's always a factor for a GM and a management staff. But if they don't, I mean, are they going to be around? Who knows, right? So it'll be interesting. There's a lot of factors in play, I would say.
Yeah. And look, I look at a guy like Voracek who came here, and I think he got traded here when he was 23.
23, yeah, but he didn't really break out and have that 80-point season for like 2 or 3
seasons. He was
seasons.
25.
26, yeah.
This is my point in that we didn't get him and he came in here and lit the world on fire. He came in here, was just a good player, about as impactful as Konechny, and then hit another level. Same with Wayne Simmons. Came in pretty good, got better and better as he hit his late 20s.
Oh, well, I'll agree with that, man. Like, development in hockey is not linear.
I would say for majority of players, it's in the second half of their 20s. Not in the mids or the first half of their 20s. I know that does not seem to be a common thing that's said, but that's how I see it. And I think that's where I differ, is that like, it's hard. This is what I talk about reality, Jim. And this is what I'm saying. Like, I can't disagree with what you're saying. I can't be like, oh yeah, Travis Konechny is a 90-point player in the NHL. Man.
Solid points.
It's like, I'd sound insane because he's never done that. And he hasn't proven he can do that. But I will always leave that caveat where if I see enough skill and I see the right situation, I go, there's still room there to grow. Same way where I see that with Sanheim. Like, people say, like, oh, is it going to be Provorov or Sanheim? I think you're nuts to move either one of them. I think you get rid of D'Angelo. You get rid of Risto. Like you don't even consider moving Sanheim, because Sanheim just showed he got even better. Can he do it again? Can Provorov hit another level? Then we're having very different conversations. And I think that's kind of where I'm at. And that's why I'm putting so much in towards. It's like, dude, please get the max at like get me the 100% out of these guys. Get me the 90. At least I know what I have. Maybe Konechny won't be here, right? But at least I'll be like, oh, he's good every time. He's consistent. When I trade him, a GM knows exactly what he's getting.
You recoup the value, and that's the thing. I think that's a factor too. It's like you need to have at least these guys bounce back. So if you decide, you know what, they're good players, but we need another direction, or we need a different type of player to bring the team to another level. Do you have the assets to trade to bring in those players? I mean, right now they might not, but they could in the future. So.
We should be the guys who are bringing in a Ryan Hartman and somehow he's a top line center. And people are like, how are you doing that?
That would be ideal. Well, we were saying last week,
environment.
Like the thing that kind of irks me with this management staff, just to kind of go off the rails, is that pretty much you don't see them ever take a swing for the fence. Like, you know, they got to sign a Delorier. Nothing wrong with that guy. You know, he's a good fourth line player. He has his role.
Swing for the fence.
No, but that's not a swing for the fence. It's a safe move. Like, why didn't you sign a Kubalik? Why didn't you go after a Dylan Strome? Why didn't you go after a younger guy that, you know, he has something to prove? You know, might as well. You like it adds to a stable group of young players, right? So like, why not continue to build that? I just don't see that with this management stuff. That's the one thing that just kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you're in a position to do that right now. Like, try a bunch of shit, because nobody really has expectations for the team anyway, right? So
yeah. All right, last topic we got here for the night. How do we think the Flyers are going to start this year? We kind of hinted at it earlier. And I think, Jim, we got a little bit of your opinion, but let's just go full-fledged here. Do we think we're going to start off slow? Do we think we're going to start off fast and like dip off? You know, start off slow and then dip off. Start off slow and then get better as the year progresses. Where do we think? Again, the reality is, and I think we're going to caveat this. How can we really say before we even see training camp?
Yeah,
but let's for funsies, let's talk ahead of time here. Where do we think it's going, Jim? I'm going to go to you first. You know, where do you think this team is going to be? Like, what kind of trend do you expect from this team, a John Tortorella team, under the current circumstances, right, with the injuries and everything and the question marks?
I think they're going to come out. Everyone's going to have something to prove, right? They're playing under a new coach. Everyone wants to make good impressions. And I think they compete. They'll be in it for, I don't know, I'm not going to put a mark on how many games they're going to play well for, but I think we'll be pleasantly surprised for a little while. And as the season goes on, I just don't know if they can hang around or hang on, or maybe when Farabee comes back, you know, he's like reinforcements and I don't know. I just don't see it going well. Like, I could talk myself into saying, yeah, you know, these guys could be okay with Tortorella kind of stirring the drink, stirring everybody together, getting everybody playing for each other and whatnot. But when I think of the improvements of the other teams, it's like, well,
yeah,
the teams that were around the Flyers last year all got better.
Yeah, you got to factor that in.
And then the teams that were already better than them are still better than them.
Hurricanes did not get better, I will say that. But they are still better than we are. But.
Right. And so it's like, you know, I could talk myself into being optimistic, but then when I take a look at the other teams, and you know, Ottawa got pretty good this year.
Yes.
Montreal added some nice little pieces. New Jersey added a lot.
Yeah.
Palat's a big addition.
The draft pick, Nemitz.
He's the new Patrick Elias. He's going to drive us nuts probably.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough not to finish last in the Metro, I think, which for a lot of people would be okay with that.
This is the year if you're going to finish last.
Yeah.
You might as well. I would say same thing kind of as you, Jim. I mean, there's only a different little bit of a caveat, I guess, with my opinion. Pretty much, you know, they're going to start out strong, like you were saying. Like, they have a lot to prove. New coach. First off, I expect a lot of the guys to come in very well conditioned because they know how Tortorella training camp typically runs beforehand. So you're going to want to be prepared for that. So guys will probably be well conditioned. The team will be well conditioned as a whole. That's a factor for success, you know, to start the season, because the other teams might not be up to that snuff, I guess. So obviously you have that mixture of guys wanting to play hard, play for a new coach, plus the conditioning. They're probably going to start out strong, start out a lot better than maybe we all expect. And then depending on, you know, how, at least for me, how the team buys into the defensive structure, if the forwards actually can actively come back and help their defense out in their own zone on a game and consistent basis, all those factors, right? Like the actual nuances of the game of hockey. Like if the team can execute a pass out of their own zone, a breakout pass, can they, maneuver through another team's forecheck in the neutral zone and get into another team's, area of the ice and create scoring chances, all of that stuff, right? So like if they can actively do that, maybe they'll be better than we expect. Personally, I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs, but I think they'll be around. They'll be in the mix for it. I don't think they'll make it, but I think it'll be a step up from where the team was obviously as a bottom 5 team, and that's what you'd want to see because that means a lot of young guys probably stepped up and performed decently, right? So we'll see what happens, though.
Well, hopefully we're all wrong in the end, right? To
And
some degree, and that they're amazing. But so this is the way I kind of see it playing out. I think in the beginning of the season, they're gonna surprise us. They might even go like on a little run where they even have a decent record. But I think a lot of times they're gonna just fall short. They're gonna give up a goal late. They're going to get outscored. They're gonna only score a goal, but they're gonna play tough. They're gonna outshoot teams or hold them to minimal shots, but they're gonna still lose somehow. So like some talented player like McDavid will go on a breakaway and beat them last second. I think we're gonna see a lot of that in the early portions of the year, and they're gonna be like, damn, like this team just doesn't have the talent to some degree. And then I do anticipate as the season goes on, a lot of those things will reverse, and we'll start like we won't have a great record, but we'll start being the annoying team in the second half of the season where all of a sudden, like the Penguins need to win a game. They're in a playoff spot and they have to win this game. For some reason, the Flyers just won 4-1. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It's like you see the little habits in their game start to build back up where you're like, well, they're playing the right way. Right. Now you add the talent in.
And they'll do it for like 2 games, and then they'll have a game where, again, like a talented team will show up and light them up or something.
They just can't hold weight because they can't fucking compete with a Tampa or a Colorado.
Something, but sense. I think we'll start seeing little bits of being the team that is annoying to play against, because even in times where the games don't matter, like when we're out of it, we're still playing 100%. Tortorella's, this is again a little bit of wishful thinking, but from what I've seen in Tortorella's thing is like we'll be that team that maybe even ruins everybody's draft pick at the end, because at the end of the season they go on like a 10-game winning streak, like which nobody wants to see, right? When you think you're tanking or whatever. But I could see something like that happening as the season goes on. Will it translate into the following year? I think you'd have to add talent, but I think that's what we'll probably see is a team that's like, oh, like, is there something here? Wait, not really. And then, oh, wait a second. There might be something here. Yeah. And then will that transfer the next year? I think you have to build on it. And that's another
almost reminds you of like his first couple seasons in Columbus.
Yeah. Like I think we'll lose the close games early and then we'll win them later in the year. That's kind of how I anticipate. I think we'll end up being about a bubble playoff team this year, barring some kind of trade or look. Then the only other caveat that I say is, one, it could always get worse, right? Things could always get worse. It could. And if it does, we're in for a long rebuild, and it just is what it is.
But also potentially Connor Bedard or Matvei Michkov. So
right. Look, and it's got its own interesting story. There is the old caveat where, and this is what I think Chuck Fletcher is praying for, and this will save his job. But if a guy like Owen Tippett or Morgan Frost or Tyson Forrester or Joel Farabee or TK, or one of these guys all of a sudden it turns out being this year's Tage Thompson, where you were like a legitimate star player by the end of the year, and everybody's like, oh, you could be a 40-goal scorer.
Yeah, nobody thought he could be.
That is something that I think could be a complete game changer for this organization. That is part of the problem, is that there are so many of these question marks without answers. But if one of these guys does turn out to be a star player, I do think, you take
conversations.
You take the Cutter Gauthier, you take the other young players around. You take the fact that you can start dealing from a position of strength because you can say, "Hey, I got another cornerstone player." I think that would also game change it to the following year, but that would be a big deal. That would put Tortorella in the Jack Adams conversation if they make the playoffs next year.
Oh yeah, somebody has a breakout.
But I think the key is somebody has to have a breakout year. alongside that, where you're like, hey, this guy is now like a legitimate player in the league.
Look at what Tortorella did. Yeah.
I think that's part of that. Yeah.
Much,
like, oh, I got Ivan Provorov to be in the Norris candidate consideration this year. He was in the top 3 voting all of a sudden. You know what I mean? Like that type of turnaround for any player, I think would give Tortorella major kudos, even if he's not all responsible for it. It could be his assistant coach who's responsible, like Shaw, but that, it would look very good.
For sure.
All right. Anything else? Jim, what do you got going on? Anything coming out? Anything you want to tell the people about that you're working on? I know you're always doing cool stuff.
Yeah, thanks. So we just had Tanner Lazinski on this past week. It was a fun little episode. Dave actually just had a roundtable show with some referees on there. I think Dave Jackson was on there. I can't remember the other 2 guys, but that show's going to release later on this week. Always fun stuff.
Listen to that one, man.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, he's Dave's really, really proud of what he does. He does good stuff over there. And I just want to say thank you guys for having me on. It's always a good time hanging out with you guys. Like I said, I was looking forward to doing the show with you guys for a couple weeks. And,
So this is a good episode of shooting the shit. So
yeah, definitely. Of course, happy to have you on, man.
Yeah,
for sure, guys.
Yeah, Vasili, what do you got going on?
Not too much. I will probably have an article out on flyersnittygritty.com at some point, like between Friday to Sunday. Who knows when between then, but at some point. So thanks everybody for checking all that stuff out and just checking the website out in general. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks. Again, they're still clearly dealing with the fire that they went through, but there is still the proceeds on our site. You can still go check out the GoFundMe. Again, all of the money will be going to them. We are not keeping a cent of that. And we are giving them still the free sponsorship here. So go out, check out Jim Steaks when they are back up on 4th and South. Shout out to Jim Steaks. And also shout out to Rebecca. I've talked about it quite, I think I brought her up last time, but she is like running our site and just doing so many little things for us. Just shout out to her. We're going to have it on the podcast, but thank you, Rebecca. You were killing it.
Doing an awesome job.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And obviously, Vasili, you joined the team, but it's amazing to find people who just like come in and hit the ground running and,
Initiative, Yariv. Yeah. That's the key word.
Initiative, and she's good and she's awesome. So thank you again, everybody, for listening. Please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, give us a rating on anything, that you want. Obviously, we're available on the podcast channels and on YouTube and everything, but thank you so much. Trying to, do more and more and trying to get more and more interviews. We're booked up for the next few weeks, so we'll keep having guests on. And yeah, we got some good stuff to talk about soon. Like the season's going to sneak up on us. We're not even that far away.
Like we're 2 weeks away from September. Then it's hockey time.
Yeah, we're almost in hockey season territory already. So it's actually really exciting. All right. Thank you, everybody, again. And remember, always stay gritty.